still like the beginning of that. I like that beginning song. Can you tell every time it plays? Like I want to play the. I want to play the air drums or something with it.
You just did.
It's really quite ridiculous. Hey, Doug Pagitt Radio, broadcasting live out of the Twin Cities around the world, as we like to hope, maybe even on the space station. And we're going to be joined here in a moment by our friend, a second timer on the show, Matt Litton. Matt has written a book called Holy Nomad: The Rugged Path, the Rugged Road to Joy. And it's a terrific little book. Hey, Matt, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Doug, good to be on, man.
Thanks. You're on with Victoria, the sidekick.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, Victoria.
Thanks.
I just saw you guys had Jim Wallace on recently.
Yes.
We did just last week. Yeah.
What a cool guy.
Yeah, you like him?
I really do.
Victoria didn't care for him.
You know,
Doug, I feel like he has hugged Bono at some point, and I feel like I've seen that picture, and so for me that makes him even cooler. You know what I mean?
You know what's really funny? A friend asked me. They said, "Oh yeah, you had Jim on. Did he tell you any stories about him and Bono?" I said, "No, he didn't." They're like, "Wow, he almost always does." I must have knocked it out of his mind.
He has a string of pictures on Facebook of his recent book tour shots, and there is a shot of us in Solomon's porch where we did the interview.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
Is there a picture of him with Bono?
No, but there's a picture of him with you, which
I
think,
that?
geez, that's pretty darn
It's a bigger
good.
deal in my world.
We should get it. I'm going to get it signed next time I see him.
Yeah, I think Bono wrote a little thing on his book. I think he and I call him Paul, but he and Paul are buddies. I think.
You know, I thought it was kind of a Kevin Bacon thing. Like if I'm on your show and you've had Jim Wallace on, in some way I've connected with Bono.
And he's friends with Bono. Well,
you're rubbing
we'll grant that to you.
Wires with Bono.
Matt Litton is the author of Holy Nomad: The Rugged Road to Joy, and he is a personal friend of Bono. Now, I'm going to now say that Matt's a friend of Bono because that's how the road went. Matt, congratulations on the book.
Thanks a lot.
Tell us what you're getting at here. It seems to me that you want people to realize that the story of God as you see it in Jesus is not supposed to be one that is waiting around a pie in the sky, a future life promise, as much as it is centered around the full life that someone is supposed to live now, and that God's about this kind of wonderful, wild-eyed activity in the world, and we should orient ourselves around seeing that.
It is. You know, the process for the book began. I actually began writing in my unfinished basement, which is about the only quiet place in my house with 4 kids.
Nice.
And you know, I started to look around at the trappings, the things that you collect in those storage spaces of life, and started to kind of come face to face with the things that I value, and the things that I've chased after. And I was really going after the question, you know, when Jesus talks about life to the fullest, what does he mean? And as I started to wrestle with that, you know, a quote from C.S. Lewis came to mind, and I think he said, "Joy is the serious business of heaven," you know? And Jesus talks in the New Testament, "I've come to bring you joy." And I started to wrestle with the fact that when Jesus says life to the fullest, he's talking about joy. And in order to experience that, you know, I think there's so many people in our culture telling us that we don't have a choice, that we don't have a role in the way our life goes. And that's just not the gospel. The gospel is about change and about moving forward. And I just started to realize that the things that we hold on to, the religion, the materialism, you know, our egos, our reflections in the mirror, those things weigh us down, and it's kind of our human condition to want to be weighed down in those dead spaces. You know, I think Walter Brueggemann talks about the God on the move, and as I started to experience this joy thing, wrestle with this joy thing, and look at, you know, what does joy look like in the lives of the people around me and the people I admire, I started to realize that being nomadic has kind of been the condition of God's people, of God's followers, since the beginning of time. And so the book is kind of this narrative journey through that process, wrestling with what that means in our life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you have an interesting take on this, where, if I'm hearing you right, you in the book, you're trying to suggest that this kind of determinism that is populist in our culture, like, hey, you know, like those are the parents you're from, or that's what you were like in 3rd grade, or that's your temperament, or that's your life situation, that is something that we need to look beyond, because that sort of sucks the joy out of life. Am I hearing you right?
That's really where it began.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's the one Bible story that kept coming back to me as I wrestled with this is the story of Jesus's friend Lazarus, and that story kind of takes on everything that I talk about, because we imprison ourselves with our dogma and with our religion. There's not freedom and joy in that. We do it with our materialism. I mean, buying a car does not make you fulfilled. You know, your Mercedes or whatever. We chase after these things that are the dead spaces in our life. And I started to see that Lazarus character as me, as you, as my friends. And it seems that we always go toward the dead spaces. And Jesus calls his friend Lazarus, you know, out from that. And it's Lazarus that takes that step into the light to follow Jesus, and I think that's where joy is generated. You know, I think sometimes we're having the wrong conversation here. You know, we're talking about heaven and hell when we should be talking about fulfillment, because when we walk toward things that are eternal, I think that's where we get fulfillment. That's where we get joy.
And it seems like you're talking about being a nomad as a state of mind. More than you don't have to sell everything and go live on a bus.
Yeah, I have fun talking about pop culture's idea of a nomad, and I talk about Kane from Kung Fu, and even the A-Team, and different examples of that. But you know, I say in the book that being spiritually nomadic means being tied to God. Being focused on God for our fulfillment. And I think if you're really honest with yourself, and if you really look at what God's calling you to, you can and probably should be nomadic from the same zip code your entire life.
I see. So part of your argument is to say, look, don't be tied to God in the sense that you're not tied to those other things. Yeah.
And Jesus has this conversation with a guy that's a lot like me. At least, I grew up in the church. Are
you a short man that's living in a tree?
No.
Oh, not that guy.
Are you a rich man that Jesus loved? Let's guess. This is fun.
You're a blind man that's sitting by the pools. No, which one are you?
I think the teacher that comes to him in the middle of the night, Nicodemus.
Oh yeah, you're like Nicodemus. Okay.
I try to teach. I can identify with him, and
gotcha.
I think that I lock into my religion and have locked into my religion as kind of the way, a lot like Nicodemus maybe. And Jesus has this conversation with him, and he says, "Look, the Spirit of God moves this way and that," and he compares it to the wind. He uses that Old Testament language as God's breath and God's wind. And to me, that's what being nomadic is. It's a condition of the heart.
And so talk me through this a little bit, Matt, because I feel myself tugged in two directions. I like what you're saying a lot, and I like this idea that we don't want as human beings to become tied to the sort of rusty traps of what our life to this point has decided to offer us, right? Whether that's by our parents or our culture or our job or our religion, whatever that is. And then I have this other pulling that's going in a different direction that says, look, human beings actually live their lives inside of all of those constructs, right? Like the job that you have and the people you talk to and the goodness that you conspire to. How can someone have a life outside of those things? Like where does someone go in their brain for the spirituality or in their thinking? Where do they go for this kind of spirituality that would be disconnected or be not trapped by the life that one has created for themselves?
I think it's part of our story to consistently forget.
Nice.
Consistently forget God's call to come forth to follow Him, and for me that's a daily struggle. Even the things we know aren't fulfilling. The material things, the new watch. I'm an Apple fanatic. I mean, the latest iPhone. I start to obsess over those things. I don't know about you, and you.
No.
It's a daily decision to talk yourself out of that. It's a
right.
prayerful decision. It's a refocusing every day to remember that call. And so, yeah, I think it's a daily decision. And, the other thing that I wrestled with for a long time with this is there are folks who have had parts of their lives dictated to them by other people.
Yes, right.
People who have been abused. And there are people who are in cells that they may never emerge from. And for me, it's not a question of heaven and hell, because I think Jesus, I call him the holy nomad in the book. He waits outside that cell your entire life. For me, it's a matter of living a fulfilled life and living with joy. So
I think that, and that's, I think that's what you're picking up on, in the book, is that there's a different, somehow something becomes a trap or becomes a cell, becomes something that has imprisoned you into these broken dreams, into this heartbroken life, into this, there's nothing I can do with it. I've just got to sort of tolerate until I get out of it. And it does seem like the call of God is a call of freedom and a call of release and setting captives free, and that can have very deep political issue, a political narrative to it, but can also have a personal and interpersonal narrative to it.
Well, it certainly has a political narrative to it as well. I talk about crash moments in the book. If you look at the story of God's people, all of the people who are heroes in the Bible all had these crash moments. And I think when we live in to the material, when we live into the religious, when we live into these things in our lives that aren't fulfilling, we are walking toward a crash. It's the human condition. And I give an example. I had a family member pass away, and we were moving, and just an enormous amount of life change. And I tell a story about my brother-in-law moving an antique mirror that we had carried from house to house that was my grandmother's. And at one point, he had just lost his wife, my sister, and we were having a very deep conversation, and we jounced the truck, and the mirror crashed. And I use that as a metaphor that I mean, from Mother Teresa seeing the poor in Calcutta for the first time to St. Francis seeing the leper, and then go through the biblical narrative. Crashes are a natural part of the human condition, and I think those crashes allow us a moment where we can be honest with ourselves and look and say, hey, the things that I'm chasing today are not fulfilling. They are not eternal. It is not joy. And so life brings us that clarity too,
Okay, we're talking to Matt. I'm just going to roll over a little thing we do on the videos, because we do this, the recordings of the video. This is Matt Litton we're speaking with. Matt's the author of the book Holy Nomad, The Rugged Road to Joy. It's a great title, by the way. Did you come up with it yourself?
I came up with part of it.
Yeah.